Today's session about the cloud, inspiring the cloud for the first time, I think. We were talking about the cloud as an infrastructural solution, but also the cloud as a provider for platforms and software packages. Now, I know I don't have speaker rights as a moderator. I'm Eurostars working for DG Environment, but because I like this subject so much that I did prepare a slide just to set the scope of my expectations of this session as well. Because cloud is something that can be really helpful for providing an end-user experience that people can rely on. So I used to work on software development as well, and there were a lot of things with the cloud. And from an end-user perspective, I have questions about the responsiveness and performance of an infrastructure. If you got your own data center, it's very costly. The cloud can provide some advantages there. If you want to serve your Inspire services as part of your e-government services or environmental e-government services, then you might support the public 24/7 and 99.9% of availability with response times below 2 seconds for mobile applications and more than 100,000 users. So that's in general the thing you expect from a decent mobile application or any other application. I think with a data center it's quite difficult to cope with it, also because you don't know the amount of users and you have to upscale, and with an old data center you have to invest in it and you have to maintain it. It's very expensive. So cloud can be a solution both for the infrastructure side and the end user's perspective. And because we did some testing in the past, and then we saw that if you're using WMS and WMTS, which are the most preferred interfaces for Inspire network services, for view services, then you see that, well, if you're using WMS, you're using a lot of core and CPU. So if you want to upscale, you need more cores. Very expensive if you have to buy servers. And if you have to put it in a farm, even more expensive. You got to slide these things in. So you have to have a lot of money. And on the other side, if you use tiles, then you got the bandwidth issue. You have to pay for the bandwidth, which is also very expensive. So if you don't have the budget for it, then I think cloud can be a perfect solution, both for the end user as for the provider side user. So a very brief setting, and I would like to see what answers you have on all these questions, because these are the questions that I think a lot of people and a lot of administrations are coping with. You've got budget cuts, but at the same time you have to prepare very performance services for the public. You have to be part of e-government to provide your value and to take your place in the value-added chain as well for the public services. So that's kind of an introduction, and with this introduction I would give the floor to the first speaker, and have to see who it is. We got this fine overview of speakers. So we got Paul and Leah, yeah, who will kick off the session introducing the Dutch National Georegister, the new version 3. Yep. I'm just going to pull this one out. It says Philip. Okay, will you find your presentation? I will help you. Yeah, no. There we are. Alsjeblieft.
Okay, dankjewel. Good morning. I'm Nicolien Jongerius. I'm working for the Cadastral of the Netherlands, and I'm the product owner of the National Georegister from the Holland. I will shorten that to NGR in this presentation. I do this presentation together with Paul van Gnuchten. He works for the company Geocat, and he is responsible for the technical support of the NGR. We would like to talk about the NGR because we did a very big project to improve the NGR. And after the project, the users were very satisfied about the result. So I think it's nice to tell you about our experience. The NGR is an element of PDoC, and PDoC stands for Public Service on the Map. I will explain you later how the construction is. The National Georegister contains the metadata for geospatial datasets and services from governmental and non-governmental organizations. The Dutch NGR is based on GeoNetwork. This is an open source product. So after the project, we shared the source code with the community. So there are a lot of other registers in the Netherlands who are using the same code, and that's good because they are governmental, and it's good to share. We started in 2016 with the upgrade from the version from 2 to version 3. That was a big release, and we released it on January of 2017. We have made a complete redesign of the user interface, so the user can easier find the metadata and also easier manage the metadata. And we also did some other improvements in the application. This diagram shows you the organization of how we organized NGR and the project. On top you see PDOK. In 2008, 5 government organizations collaborated and started a program in order to provide a central platform which provides nationwide geo-information of the Dutch government. On the platform, which is maintained by the Cadastre of the Netherlands. We did the project together with Geonovum, and we had a resonance group who gave us feedback and helped testing the functionality of NGR. We asked them to give feedback on the right working and functionality and usability of the registry. In this sheet, you have an overview from the environment of NGR, the application. The metadata can be harvested from the local metadata portals of the providers of metadata. And also you can add manually metadata in the application. The metadata from NGR can be found by search engines, and of course they can be harvested. They are harvested by the Inspire portal, but also by other open data portals like data.overheid.nl, that's a Dutch one, and the EU Open Data portal. Now I will show you some main functionalities of NGR. Of course, we have a quick search. You can search on a topic, on a location, or on the category. Also, we have an advanced search, and you can search on different elements. You can also filter on the elements. Our users find that very handy. We also have an editor for metadata of datasets and also for the services. We have different profiles to make it easier for our users. For example, we have also made a basic view for the metadata of the dataset. So you only have to fill in the really needed elements. So it's easier for our users, because a lot of users find it tough material, the metadata, and that's why we try to add more to make it easier for them. We have also a view of the total ISO standard. So the advanced users can also use the application very well. We have a map viewer. In the map viewer you can have a preview of the few services, WMS and the WMTS from the metadata. We also have the possibility to do metadata transformation. For example, you can make an RDF transformation. Well, of course, the harvesting, I've already told you about that. And the configuration management. It's the management, of course, of the user accounts and also the harvester settings, by example. And then we have the WFS download wizard. In Azure, the provider can add a link, and a WFS link, to the service metadata, and the user can easily download the dataset by clicking on that link. We have focused on easy use for the users. So users could easily find the metadata and manage the metadata. So we, when we started with the project, we hired a web design company who designed an intuitive user interface. So it's easy to use, and you do not need really much explanation by that. After that, we also had early feedback from the maintenance group, because at the start of the project we have organized that already. So that was important for the acceptation and the quality of the registry. We also made some videos to show what the application was and how the users could use the functionality. This was a success by the users, so it's good to have that. And then we have the basic editor. I already explained that to you, but that's also a great success. We also extract metadata from linked service capabilities. We have made a suggest service to fill in the elements automatically in the edit form. This works with the service capabilities. And now Paul will tell the rest of the presentation.
So what we focused on was search optimization, search engine optimization. GeoNetwork has some challenges when you install the default product, and we're hoping to fix that also in the core version soon. But it also needs some special attention for each use case, because you want to define URIs that are really relevant and persistent in your infrastructure. In the search engine optimization, we also introduced the schema.org dataset mapping, so that the search engines can crawl the content of the catalog in a structured way. So we use the Arena ISO to GeoDCAD app conversion, did a bit of fixes, because we have in the Netherlands we have a Dutch profile, which is a specialization on top of the Inspire profile. So we made a couple of changes there. This is part of the Dutch schema plugin. We reuse the minted URIs that are minted in the search engine optimization with the content negotiation, so that you can say, okay, I want this metadata in XML, RDF, or HTML. But the mapping to DCAD actually gave us a kind of a challenge, because we didn't have any use cases in the Netherlands. We did the mapping, but there was nobody using that data. The Open Data Portal, for example, doesn't use DCAD yet itself. And we're wondering if others in the room have experiences there, and would like to share that. So this is one of the findings that we had on the project. We have a big thing in the Netherlands that all the government has to switch to HTTPS by the end of this year, but it will be a shoot. It's probably not going to be real, but we'll see. But in the meantime, we have this problem of mixed content. If we run the catalog on HTTPS, no HTTP WMS service will be able to be embedded. So that's why we still run the catalog on HTTP. However, when people log in, we switch them to HTTPS. I think that's a good convention for now, until we're all on HTTPS. People, go to HTTPS, all of you, soon, and tell it to your data providers. Because login over HTTP is denied by browsers these days. Other thing is cross-site scripting. Is that browsers tend to get more strict and strict over time, because we have more spoil experiences. So GeoNetwork usually uses proxy to overcome the proxy side scripting, but that really has some security challenges. So also again, please tell all your data providers to put a CORS header on their WFS, WMS. So it's actually the only way to go forward, also related to single sign-on kind of authorizations. What we did in the Netherlands, we create, people who may familiar with GeoNetwork, we have this mechanism of adding schema profiles. And what we did, we have 2 schema profiles, one for data sets and one for services. And it allows us to create a different form configuration for a service and for a data set. And also a visualization on the front end. And that really helps in the ease of use of the product. Thank you.
Thanks to Nicole for presenting the new Dutch National Geo portal or Georegister, and thanks to Paul for introducing some good practices used when developing for the web.
I forgot to answer your questions in the beginning. We're all changing to Docker, so we're fine.
Oh, you're fine as well. Okay. Because I saw that you're using WMS and WMTS, so it goes for you as well. And I know that the Dutch are preparing a transformation towards what's called the environmental law of something, which is then implements Inspire as a base provider for services as well. So it might come in handy to have a decent infrastructure behind it. Yeah. Okay. So because I know that Nicole has to go at 12, I think we can open the floor for some questions. Yeah. Oh, Martin.
Two questions. First one, would it be possible to give us some indication what was the investment so far from the development you presented to this version you are now in this stage? And the second question would go to Paul for this availability of the content from your system to, let's say, other potential users. It means that the possibility to expose the information through the metadata is currently available only on the particular metadata element, like was shown in that snapshot where I could choose either the RDF instance, or it's possible that if I will open now the Google search engine and will type some request towards some particular address or a hydro data set for your region, I am relatively able to expect that I will see the result in the response from the Google in some top ranking place? Thank you.
To start with the last question, this is an actual search on DuckDuck, and it shows one of the Dutch data sets quite high. Yeah. Yeah, so most of the functionality is back in the core product. So you can, however, the search engine optimization. I wrote a blog post about it. I'll share the link with you. How you can do it yourself. It's not that hard, but it needs some. You have to put a policy in place for the URIs. So you have to discuss with your partners. About the budget, I don't know. It's quite a big project.
I can not give you the amount, but it was a project about, I think, 10, 11 months we worked on that. And the team was with one tester. He was testing full-time. And then we had, 3 developers. They were not working full-time, I think, for 3 days. And then we had the functional business people were with 2. And the good thing of it is it's open source, so we have developed a lot that everybody can use. So it was once an investment by the Cadastre. Have done it with the partners of PDoc. But because it's open source and we share the source with other people, for you it's cheaper if you're going to use it. Yeah. And also for the other portals in the Netherlands. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think we can still take one. No? I've got a final one for you, Nicoli and Paul. I hope it's very nice functionality, search engine optimization, support of DCAT. And I understood, Nicoli, that this will be in the basic version of GeoNetwork, available for all GeoNetwork customers, or not?
There is a DCAT conversion in the core product. What we did, we replaced it with the Arena one.
Yeah.
I'll write a blog post about how you can do it. It's easy. But the product is global, so we try to do as much of Inspire in the core product, and you activate it with settings.
Yeah.
But at some point, you have to do manual stuff to get Inspire ready. That's why we have the Docker initiative. We have now Docker for GeoNetwork for Inspire Docker. So in there is already pre-configured.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Very promising. To check it out. GeoNetwork for Inspired Docker version. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. And then I would like to give the floor to the next speaker, Thierry Chevalier, the AK Technologies. He will present us the Inspire in the Cloud and the GDPR, a spatial proxy solution. Sounds promising.
Good morning, everyone. So, well, my name is Thierry Chevalier. I work as a software engineer and specialized in geographical information system, like many of us. I work for AK Technologies. I'm going to talk to you about, in particular, data protection in the context of Inspire in the cloud. So as a GIS software designer, I've been part of several projects in the past 4 or 5 years, and one of these projects was the In GeoClouds project, which was a European-funded project aiming at demonstrating the feasibility of employing a cloud-based infrastructure to provide inspired services. So this project came to an end a couple of years ago, and the outcomes of this project, of which many national geosurveys were part of, one of the outcomes of this project was that, well, it is feasible to employ a cloud-based infrastructure to provide inspired services, but one of the other outcomes of the project was that data protection in the cloud was a concern. It gave us the opportunity to build a new partnership and to be part of a new consortium in a new European project funded by the European Commission, in which we acted as use case providers, providing use case on behalf of national geosurveys, actually. And this project was, and is still, Clarus, which aims at demonstrating and developing a framework for securing data in the cloud. So I'm going to talk to you about all the things I've learned, because I'm a GIS guy. I'm not a data protection expert, but having worked in the past 2 years with security experts, data protection experts in universities in Catalonia, in London, etc., I gained some insights, and so I get familiar with the field of data protection, and that's what I want to talk to you about now. So what is GDPR? GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation, and it's the most important change in data privacy regulation in 20 years. So yesterday during the plenary session, someone stepping back in the 2007 when Inspire was coming was saying, hey, Inspire is coming, so now in 2018 we could say GDPR is coming, and it's it will enter into force in the 25th of May. So the GDPR will replace the 1995 Data Protection Directive. I thought that this timeline would be would make it easy to understand what it means, actually, that regulation replaces another regulation which dates back to 1995. Because you can see that in the World Wide Web there have been many technological advances which impacts the life of every one of us, I think, and which has an impact on data privacy, whether it is search engines, webmails, social networks, and so on. And as well, in the geographical web, there have been technologies which have an impact. So there is the GPS navigation for all, there have been tiled web maps with street views, location-based services, and so on. So all these new technologies were not present in 1995, of course, and so there was the need for an adjustment of the regulation. So what is the GDPR? We can summarize in 3 points. So the first one is that what does it change? It strengthens the rights of EU citizens. With things just like giving unambiguous content, data portability, it improves the rights of children, and it introduces a right to compensation. Secondly, it increased the accountability of data processors, which means that an organization which processes personal data need to demonstrate its compliance with the GDPR at all times. This is a change. So privacy by design, what we call privacy by design, will become the rule, actually. So you cannot say, develop a solution and then after, oh, we will secure it afterwards. No, you have to take it into account from the design phases. You've got the introduction of a specific role, which is the data protection officer, which will be responsible for data protection policies in the company. And thirdly, it improves greatly the efficiency of the regulation, because it provides a unified legal framework across Europe. It is a regulation, it is not a directive, which means that on the day 1, 25th of May 2018, it will be applicable to all member states in a unique way. And it introduces dissuasive penalties which, for the organization which will not respect the rule, up to 20 million euros or 4% of the global turnover, which is quite a lot. So, well, we are talking about the cloud today. What you have to know is that GDPR in the cloud is difficult, because there are a lot of reasons for this. Unfortunately, I have not the time to deal with them all, but I would like to introduce a very specific risk to the cloud computing, and which we are working on in the Clarius project. It's the honest but curious threat model, which means that when you give your data to a cloud provider, you consider that he is honest, but he will be curious and try to exploit all available data, and he could infer, sometimes involuntarily, private information. Then there is the question of technology when you want to become compliant with the GDPR. And another thing you have to know to understand the genesis of Clarius is that the European Commission invests quite a lot in funding of research and innovation on data protection in the cloud. So this led to the Clarius project, but other projects as well, so which we have the logos here, and which are part of a cluster, which is the DPSP cluster, which means data protection and security and privacy in the cloud. When it comes to technologies, we could say that Clarius corresponds to 2 innovations which are in the mood today. There is cloud encryption gateway and cloud access security brokers. These are 2 terms, and Clarius lies in the middle of these 2 concepts. So what is it basically? It is given, for instance, a trusted zone, which is sometimes a premises, which we consider it is trusted. It might not be the case, but anyway. And we consider that the cloud side is untrusted because of this honest but curious model. So Clarius is a proxy which will perform data protection on data sets, whether it is encryption or anonymization or data splitting or a set of techniques. And it protects as well search queries which are transformed and the results which are unprotected on the fly. So basically that's a concept. So, well, let's talk about Inspire. So then when we think about data protection and when we are an Inspire actor, I think we have to ask ourselves these kind of questions. What are the data I am talking about? Are they personal or non-personal? Are they sensitive or non-sensitive? Are they confidential or non-confidential? These are different aspects. And geographical or non-geographical is another one. So just as a reminder, there are exceptions to the obligation of publishing data. When you read the directive, there are exceptions. You are not obliged to publish data when there is a threat to public security, to the confidentiality of commercial information, or confidentiality of personal data. But the problem, and one of the problems, is that the definition of personal data is moving, is changing. It's not the same as it was 20 years ago, for instance. So what is personal data? So it's any information which relates to an identified subject. And what the GDPR is introducing is that it could be by reference to an identifier such as location data, and it changes quite a lot of things. On the other side, sensitive personal data is personal data that allow one to reveal ethnic origin, religious or philosophical beliefs, data concerning health or sex life, etc. So, well, first of all, are there personal data in the INSPIRE scope? I think that on the non-geographical side, yes, because any access data, for instance, to a geoportal could be a personal information, because you could derive information on people who have accessed, read, or downloaded environmental data are considered personal. On the geographical side, there have been a couple of presentations in the previous INSPIRE conferences, from Aalborg in 2014, Lisbon, etc. And what they have in common, all this presentation about data privacy in INSPIRE, is the aerial and satellite imagery theme. But there are some other questions about cadastre and land use, etc. But mainly it's aerial and satellite imagery, which could become personal at a certain product resolution. Well, but let us be honest, personal data is not the main topic. So here it's the result of a questionnaire which was conducted during the EGDI scope survey, and which was somehow related to our topic today. What are the legal barriers that you meet currently? And you see that private data is only a small part of it. You've got confidential data, which is data that could have industrial value or so on. You've got boreholes, which is about national security or mineral resources. So this kind of thing, which are not personal data but confidential data. So just I'm close to a conclusion. I would like to just stress out what we have been doing technically to tackle this problem. Well, and the Clarus proxy actually is parsing the protocols. So we have made quite a lot of work on this aspect of protocol parsing. For PostGIS protocol and WFS, we try to provide support to WPS as well. There is sensitive data and identification, and there are data protections which are applied on the fly, which is anonymization, encryption, and splitting. There are other applications, and I will come to a conclusion saying that there are new rules. The GDPR is kind of quantum leap in the field of data protection, and privacy by design will be the rule. And these new rules led to new technologies. So that's interesting. That's you've seen that the European Commission is funding projects which are open source, which are free to use, in order to protect your data, to comply with the new rule. And one thing that is important here is that these new technologies, which are motivated first by personal data protection, could be used to other purposes. Confidential data protection, or many other use, for instance, semantic enhancement or metadata creation on the fly or so on, in the case of the Clarus proxy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thierry. Very impressive. before I ask a question, then I think I should open the floor to the audience because you said some very interesting stuff. Oh, Martin. Martin always has a question.
Sorry for that, but this is a very interesting topic, and I'm very thankful for your shared experience. Just two points. First one, we are these days very heavily discussing with the data providers from the national coordination perspective in Slovakia about some sort of guidance and instructions for their work, where to create this border, what shall be made available through the Inspire without any limitations, and if they identified some confidential or personal data, whether either they shall publish it and just document that this is not accessible because of this reason. But based on your experience from the project, do you think using, for example, that proxy platform, would it be possible to make available data either as a Inspire harmonized transform data with some sort of locked certain attributes, for example, or locked certain geometries, or it would be even better done like it was presented in the previous session by Paul, that data publishers should just annotate their data and leave, let's say, these sort of lockers on their side, and then leave it up to the users to end up in the situation that if they will search for certain data and they will come to the data set itself, there will be some message that wait, this is only for the certain type of users, and if you are that user, then please contact us through this channel. Thank you.
Well, this is an interesting question because first of all, I would like to say that it depends on the level of confidentiality. And for instance, if you identify your data set which are somewhat confidential or sensitive or so on as personal data, it means that in one way or another you process data that has personally identifiable persons behind, then you could go for a protection which is anonymization. And then once your data set is anonymized, well, everyone could use it. For instance, statisticians and so on, we don't need to know who is it concerned by this data and so on. So that's the first thing. So then you could open it, you know. And once it is anonymized, you could open it without any problem. Then if you want to, if it is not personal, but for instance confidential, I mean, for instance, you have the location of a very sensitive thing. We have the use case of groundwater boreholes, for instance, which in the Code de l'Environnement in France is specified as being a sensitive location. You should not reveal it to anyone. So then you would have to either coarsen the location or encrypt it. I don't know if it is really sensitive. So then you will have to give the key to someone else. You could say leave it encrypted in the cloud, and then only some users have also a Claris proxy on their side, and they have the key to decrypt it. So that's different use cases, different usages. We have tried to be very broad in this project because we are a use case provider in the field of the geospatial domain, environmental, but there is also, for instance, the Hospital of Barcelona, which is providing patient data. It's very sensitive. So that's different use cases. It depends.
Thanks. Somebody else? Paul?
So this is more a remark, but it struck me. FOSFOG in Bonn last year, there was a keynote from Ton Zijlstra. It was really a good keynote, and what struck me in that presentation was that as geo-domain, we're really in the heart of the privacy discussion, and everything can be inferred from your location. So it's something that we really should be think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
I'm not going to open discussion anymore because we're going to run over time. Just want to give that we got indeed in Inspire, we got the same problems. We got derogations on the data sharing and confidentiality and defense and national security is one of these things. France is using this as a derogation on Inspire for water boreholes. That's right. The question is if it's confidentiality, because there are some rules also, some rulings also from the Court of Law and from the legal service of the Commission itself on the use of land parcel information systems, which is not being considered as confidential. You can link it to a farmer if you got the farmer's holding and so on, but that's processing of the data, and then you would need substantial different data on top of it to make the link to the personal and confidential information. But in Inspire as well, we know that we have to align with this new emerging legal framework of the GDPR, and even together with, and also aligning with the process of the review of the public service information, the review of public service information. So it's always all emerging for the moment. So we're doing a study to align the data sharing regulation in Inspire as well with these new regulations. But I don't know if it will create. Probably we hope that it will create more clarity for everybody in the end, that we have a good definition of confidentiality. But as I hear you, you say still it's still up to the member states to decide which is confidential, as you say.
Yes, actually, what is really well defined is personal data in a GDPR, because GDPR is only about personal data.
Yeah.
So it's either personal data, which I provide the definition, and sensitive personal data. But confidential data, it's all depends on the domain, you know. So in an environmental field, it could become, for instance, oil prospection thing, which has a commercial value, or it could become issues with national security. So the precise location of something is critical. So this could be confidential and independent.
And it's a very important process that has to be very, very efficient and very clear to everybody, also to the businesses. That gives a clear use. It's the future of the data technology and the data economy in Europe. If you don't have a clear regulation on the possible use of this kind of data in the cloud, and for cloud solutions, then it's going to be very difficult to develop a data economy in Europe. So I think it's very important. So very glad that you introduced us to the concepts. I think we'll have to discuss this in upcoming conferences as well as a follow-up. So I would like to thank you very much, Thierry.
Thanks,
So, again, thank you. Without any further ado, I want to give the floor to Andreas Roos, who will present Inspire in a Box.
Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andreas Rose. I'm the managing director of Grid GmbH. We are doing, we are programming and developing geoinformation systems since quite a time, since 1989. And I have to give you a warning up front. This will not be a technical presentation. I did programming once ago, but this is a long time ago, and since several years I'm working on contracts and the legal framework and all that stuff we are doing to get our things out to the market and to get a living out of it. And well, what we did here and what I want to present to you is Inspire in a Box. And basically the whole presentation could be put into one slide, and this is the one you see. What we did is we produced a virtual appliance for Inspire Network Services, which can be located in the cloud and used there, ready to use, and it's designed for customers who are not as technical able as many others. So I don't want to close my presentation, but I wanted to tell you how did we come to that? What were our reasons to work in such a way? Wait a moment, I have to get this here clear. Yeah. We started some time ago, it's almost 8 years now, when we made a geo portal for a customer in Thuringia, and we used deegree to do that. And he used to present his geographical data. It's an administration for a whole country in Germany, and they did the usual stuff. And when we began with them, it was the usual way. The server, which the customer was using, was standing under the desk of himself, so he could do everything, and everything was fine. And yeah, but then times changed, and the customer more or less got forced to put its application into the data center. And then things changed, and we got presented with several problems. First of all, was that the data center didn't provide the right access, which we did have, which we used to have, and which we needed to manage the application. Yeah? You couldn't change the color of a map from blue to red. It wasn't any more possible. You had to phone him and tell him, do that for me. You had to explain to him where he should do it and all these things, and it was quite problematic. So what we did was to develop that thing which we call deegree enterprise in the meantime, and you see degree here on the left half of the slide. That still works, and we worked on that as well, but on the other hand we developed many other applications which just fulfilled one purpose, and that was to separate the needs of the user, of the administrator, of the geographical part of the problem with the data center. Yeah? That is the mode of operations which is used actually. That means shared operations. The data publisher has access to the application by means of the administration application, and the data center operations take care of the rest. So they both work on their part, which they are responsible for, and don't disturb each other anymore. That was one aspect we did from the software development side. But then we got deeply into the core of operations. And one problem the data center had was that they simply refused to use open source if it's not supported by their standards. There were security reasons, there were uptime reasons, there were any kinds of problems as well, and so we were forced to develop a kind of contractual framework how we could operate the software in a data center. And the first customer was not the only one. Later on, we detected that there was a trend, or they behaved, all the data centers which our customers had, they behaved all the same. They wanted to have a contractual framework. And so we developed that. And basically, we kind of adopted the software. You know, it's open source, and open source lives from the community, and the community is it's active, and it's very good to have the community, because the whole inputs, the drive of a project, of an open source project, comes from that community. But on the other hand, you cannot enforce delivery times, or there are dates which you have to keep on, and you can deliver a new version of the software only 2 years or two times in a year, and so this were the reasons why the data center told us no way, you can't operate this here because you can't keep the days. So we had to take care of that, and we did, and we made the contract that we would take care of every problem which arises in the software. So this is what I mean with adopted. We took the software, and then we told them, okay, if there will be a problem which will arise, we will fix it, and we will support you in the operations, which we did as well. What we did, or what we do regularly now, is we are a third level support, and if there is any problem deep within inside the machine arising, then we solve it. This became our business model. And I have to look to the next slide. Yeah, here we are. These were the requests. 24/7 operation, the availability, you know that all from the Inspire requirements, but basically the requirements in a regularly operating geoportal are at least the same, if not even more. And so we did that. We fixed in security patches, bug fixes. We made a software development plan, a roadmap, so that the customers could see what will happen when, and could put their own organization on top of that. And this we put into contractual frameworks and presented it to our customers, and well, everything was fine, but we had to pay something for that. You know, open source, everyone can take it, everyone can put their own software in it, can fix bug fixes and all these stuffs, but we were not longer able to work on this basis. It not only when it came to the source code, but even configuration files. If you are promising to keep the living of an application, then you are not able to allow other people to change software, to change configuration files, to change something. Yeah? So we have to control what the system which is running as a customer. Not by wanting to get the application, but by sheer force of securing the application, you have to close it down. Yeah? So you have quite a contradiction between open source and in the operating modus. Yeah? You have to take care of the control, and then you are not open anymore. So it's a kind of contradiction, but you need it to deliver what you have promised. Quality assurance is a word. And we have quite a few customers, and what we try to do is convince them that they should change their operating modus to virtual machines, and they refused to do that. Clearly refused to do it because the individual backgrounds were so different that they couldn't do it, and so we gave that up. And well, they came to us and said, we have Postgres version I don't know, and we said, okay, should work, you can do it. Yeah. Then the next person came and he had another version, and we looked at it and said, okay, you can do it, perhaps it will run. And then there was the first guy who came and said, I have a SQL Server from Microsoft, and then we refused to deliver. So what happened is that the infrastructure, the applications which are besides the core application, quickly tend to get fuzzy, and then you can't deliver a true promise that the software quality will be good. And then really kind of relief, we discovered Docker and were able to solve that. And because now we were not on this strict requirements a virtual machine should have. We were on a much softer level where we could deliver a unified parcel, which is the same for each and every of our customers, and on the same time not to put him into a strict corset which he couldn't deliver. So Docker was very good, and I think we are on technical basis here. Perhaps all of you are familiar with Docker concepts. It's quite simple. If you look at it, you make a kind of container where you put in the app and all the dependent bins and libs, so you are stuck together all you need, and this encloses configurations files as well, and then you put it onto a Docker machine and it will run there. And this is of many advantages. You can test it, and if it runs by you or in your office, it will run everywhere. That's the hope. Well, I think there are limitations on that as well, but we didn't discover them already. This is a process. You build it, you ship it, and then it runs. Well, I put this slide or the image from the Docker site itself, so it looks quite positive, but actually really it is, and what we discovered up to now gives us no reason to believe that it wouldn't work. So what you can do now on the operational side of you is you have the developer, he puts up the container, and then he puts it up to the end customer, the data publisher himself, which we have. This is the usual modus operandi. And what happened in the last month is that we got in contact with data centers which are trying to get solutions for their customers, which are most of the times these are small communities, and these small communities don't have the ability to fulfill the Inspire requirements for themselves, because several thousand people, and they don't have a GIS expert in their in their administration, so they need help. And what they have with all the other IT aspects are usually they have contracts with data centers. These data centers have in Germany, they have concentrated quite a lot in the last years, and so there are, for instance, in Niedersachsen in Germany, there are 3 data centers which are covering all the rest of the country. So they have quite big number of customers, and they have to provide a solution. And we contacted them, or other way around as well, and then we came to the solution to put their solution into one of these Docker containers, so they could use it and then multiply it.
Andreas, 2 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Basically, I told you everything. The Docker container is the modus to put the software out, to be able to run it, and then to do the scaling as well. You mentioned that no one knows how the access numbers will, the hit rates, yeah, and then you get astonished by the number of hit rates, and then you have to scale up. How do you do it? Put up a new server the classical way, or do it with Docker? And Docker is much better. Actually, we are developing a system where the scaling is done automatically, so the number of servers goes up and goes down, and the new pricing models for the external data center providers, for instance, Fujitsu or Amazon, they are you pay by the minute. So if you can scale down by the minute, then you can spare money, a lot of it. So my summary. Docker is a technology which is, I don't care about the technology at all, from my point of view. My point of view is the reliability which you can achieve, the scalability, the distribution goes much better, the speed and the cost goes down, and that means the quality of our services much improves, and this is why I am interested in Docker. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Maybe one quick question from the audience.
Quite interesting. And I was just curious, so I guess you have a lot of customers in Germany. Are you deploying your Docker, your Inspire solution in the box on cloud services anywhere, or is it mainly being deployed in data centers, the containers?
No, we not yet. Not yet. We plan to do that, but that's not realized already. But actually, we built the images and then put it to the customer, and then it's project work. Up to now, it's project work, but the technology is quite clear. Our next step will be to put it into a repository, and every customer we have, and we will build up the infrastructure at the customer himself, because Docker can do that to get differential updates. Yeah, so everything should be when it's running, and I'm very confident about that. Everything should run automatically, and that will serve a lot.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Very reassuring that we're moving to the cloud with Inspire, and I think Ken will follow up on your presentation by leveraging the cloud to further develop Inspire infrastructure. Please, Ken, take a stand.
No, this has been great stuff. I was really happy to be part of this track, because a lot of interesting topics that are interesting to me as well. So I will find my deck here. Right, so hi. My name's Ken Bragg. I work for Safe Software. So we're a Canadian company that makes FME. I'm really fortunate in the sense that my slides are auto-advancing. No, I'm really fortunate in the sense that our company is really fanatical about cloud technology. The two owners of our company really got excited about cloud technology early. So it's a fun place to work, because it's a really big part of our culture as a company is using cloud technology and cloud services. So I'm going to talk a bit higher level, in a sense, about what we've seen from our customers and what we've learned about cloud technology. One thing I'm not going to talk about too much, and it's kind of unusual for me, is our main product is FME. If you don't know about FME at this point in the conference, we haven't done our job. I think there's been lots of talk about FME. So I'm not going to actually talk about our product too much. FME is a data translation and data transformation tool, and that's about all I'm going to say on it. I'm also not going to talk too much about the basics of cloud computing, but there are two terms that we kind of need, and that's platform as a service and software as a service. And you alluded to this at the beginning. So just to be clear, when we're talking about platform as a service, we're talking about using virtual machines, using file systems in the cloud, kind of infrastructure related. And when we're talking about software as a service, we're talking about applications that run in the cloud. So I'm going to touch on kind of both of those themes as I go through this. One thing I did not find, and you submit a presentation and you look at your abstract, and I said, I'm going to talk about how our customers are leveraging cloud services for Inspire. And to be honest, we have lots of customers using cloud services, and we have lots of customers doing things with Inspire, but we don't have a lot of customers doing things with Inspire in the cloud. So I didn't actually find a lot there yet. I really believe that cloud technology in general is going to be extremely advantageous to providing Inspire services, but the uptake is, I would say, still, there's still a ways to go. So this was interesting. What I did find some examples I'm going to talk about using cloud services, both sort of at the PaaS level and the software as a service level. Sorry, my deck keeps auto-advancing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we have learned as we deployed our own product, FME Cloud, into the cloud, and what we've learned from some of our customers here. So number one, how are cloud services being used by Safe Software and by our customers? Just some examples that we've kind of run into. And I'm going to go through this kind of from the ground up, let's say. Most cases, I'm going to give examples from AWS and Azure. There's other cloud platforms, but those are the ones we kind of know more about. Most of the work that we've done at SAFE has been in AWS, Amazon Web Services so far. So these are the examples I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk about in more detail. So the first level we can look at is file and block storage in the cloud. And these are technologies that can be super for Inspire. And I think of just the Atom download service. To have those zip files on S3 or in Azure Block Storage, there's a cost factor there, there's a performance factor there, there's so many advantages to deploying those download services that way. And I'm talking from a technical standpoint right here, but these are really super services. If you don't know what S3 is, it's really just a big web server in the cloud that provides file services. I used to do this joke as we did our FME World Tour. I would say, who's heard of S3? So, just put up your hand. Who's heard of S3? Okay. So in this room, the majority. Who has heard of Dropbox? Okay, everybody. And this is always my fun example. Where does Dropbox store data? Well, S3. It's a very ubiquitous platform for file storage. Just to provide some examples of how that's being used in our world, European Environment Agency, I know, uses Azure Blob Storage very heavily. So that's one customer that's using that technology. They created for our software a transformer that lets them move data into Azure Blob Storage and out of, so FME transformers to do that. That's just one example. Our own FME Cloud product, we use S3 very heavily for storage. And it kind of gets at a concept I want to come back to off and on, this concept of serverless architecture. So it's really increasingly possible to build web services without a web server. You have the storage part, S3, Azure Block Storage, whatever you want. And then there's all kinds of computing functions available in the cloud now as well. So you don't need a web server to do the computing part either. And this is kind of an interesting concept, and there's a lot of benefits for deploying applications that way. Other big area, of course, virtual servers. This is probably the first area that we started working with the cloud, I don't know how many years ago, in that we deployed our training materials in our training course through Amazon EC2 instances. So this is the idea that you have what seems like a computer. You log into the operating system, but it's running in the cloud. And some examples that we run into, ArcGIS for Inspire is available on EC2, so you can launch ArcGIS for Inspire on EC2. One of our joint customers that we have with Esri, Andalusia Environment Agency, deployed an Inspire solution running on Amazon EC2. I was talking to Peter Parslow from Ordnance Survey UK yesterday. It turns out they're using Azure Virtual Machines quite a bit on at Ordnance Survey for various parts of their Inspire solutions. So, this is probably the first area a lot of people ran into cloud services, was using virtual servers. And in a lot of ways, as a user, you may not be aware that you're even using a virtual server. In a big organization, actually at Safe Software, a lot of the machines that we use for testing are actual virtual servers in an Amazon private cloud. You don't really know that when you're working with it. It's fairly transparent. So, sorry. Here we go. So Docker, it was great to hear Andreas mention that. There was a tweet went around, I think early in the conference, and somebody said, every time I hear the word Docker at Inspire, I think I want to take a drink. You know that game, every time you hear the word take a drink? And I tweeted back and I said, well, I hope you get drunk, because this technology is really, I think, going to be increasingly important in all kinds of areas, but particularly Inspire. And I don't even feel like I need to say too much on that, because Andreas provided a really good explanation of the benefit for using container technology to deploy solutions. Just to put it on my own way briefly, 2 huge advantages. You can deploy a solution anywhere regardless of platform. So Docker is going to let us put our FME cloud solution. It's going to enable us to port that. We run it mainly on AWS right now, but it's going to enable us fairly easy to move that over to Azure, which is kind of a next step for us. If anybody's seen the presentation on LD proxy here at the Inspire conference, it's an interesting project about discoverability about Inspire data sets. Well, that's really easy to set up because that's a Docker container. So you can get the container off the Docker repository and let it go. So it's not necessarily cloud technology, Docker, but for us, it's going to be a really fantastic way to deploy our solution in a scalable way into cloud platforms. When we come to compute services, again, this gets back to this serverless architecture concept, where you can upload code to, at AWS we have Lambda, for Azure we have functions, there's other platforms that have a similar idea. So you can upload code and applications. They run and scale in cloud services. You're not running these in a server. You don't have to say, I want this to run in this computer and duplicate this instance so many times to serve the application. The platform scales the application automatically. So this is serverless architecture. I think I have a bit of an example on this, and this is a little bit complicated, so I don't want to belabor it too much, but one of our customers, they're processing the European meteorological model, the ECMWF model. So these are very, very big files that they're handling. These things get delivered into S3. This is the file platform I was talking about on Amazon. And there's a little bit of AWS Lambda code that says, okay, one of these files is here. We need to scale up, in our case, FME cloud instances to process this file. When it's done, we shut them back down. And this gets, somebody mentioned it, I think it was Andreas, this gets again to the point that we don't want customers running services when they're not using them. It costs them money and it costs us money. So we want to scale them down when they're not in use. So it's a bit of Lambda code that takes care of that scaling. There's many other ways to scale solutions on the cloud, but this is an interesting application of Lambda. On the database side, of course, we've got quite a bit of offerings available in AWS and Azure. So AWS offers the RDS. To us, for example, we use PostGIS in our FME server solution. So that's, in fact, when we run that on FME Cloud, that's an RDS. It's PostGIS in RDS. So to us, it looks just like PostGIS, but that's an Amazon service. So Aurora, DynamoDB, very high performant NoSQL database. Other interesting point I want to make there, most of the NoSQL databases that are emerging and becoming more and more important, they're all kind of available in these cloud services. So that's kind of where they're being used. Azure, we've got SQL database and then SQL data warehouse, which more supports the idea of the data lake kind of scale of things.
Again, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. Well, I haven't got to what we've learned yet, so I'll speed things up. Just an example of another customer using SQL Azure in the cloud. This is ISOGeo, who did a presentation earlier this week. Software as a service, I think, is maybe where we see a lot of the easy benefits coming around. So FME Cloud, that's our software as a service offering. ArcGIS Online is obviously software as a service running in the cloud. ISOGeo I mentioned. WeTransform, Torsten's going to be talking after me, I believe. That's another software as a service in the cloud. So these are big areas, really important areas where we can get a lot of benefits quickly because we can we can start up the application very, very easily without worrying about all the dependencies. Just very quickly, some of the things we've learned, just our experiences. Okay, in theory, cloud-based infrastructure should be cheaper, but the costs aren't fixed. And this is a challenge when you're selling a solution to a customer, but it's a challenge for a lot of government organizations when you can't say exactly how much something's going to cost per month. We're trying to address that in our own solution, but it is a challenge, and I'm not sure I have a good answer to that. It's also easy to spend money. You know, AWS, you give it your credit card and away you go, right? And they don't care, right? If you leave something running, some very large instance running for a long time. So there's this whole billing alerts thing set up in all the platforms, and you know, really you need to take advantage of that, or you can be in trouble. Some of the benefits here, I mean, the capital expenditure is in a way zero for cloud stuff. There's no hardware costs. In theory, these things should be quite a bit more cheap. When we come to security, you know, this is a controversial statement, but I'm going to make it anyway. AWS is probably more secure than your data center. No one can bring, you know, you can't take one of these into an AWS data center. There's just no way. So it's a debatable concept, and we could get into the details about it. But I would challenge somebody to, well, I don't know if I want to debate it, but you know, when you look at the level of security,
you don't have the time to debate it.
I don't have the time. Okay, so yeah, if you look at the level of security certification that these cloud companies are doing, it's all of this was security was designed from the ground up on all of these cloud services. For example, you know, you cannot run FME Cloud not in HTTPS. It has to be in HTTPS. This kind of thing. So. Yeah, I'm going to have to skip a few things here. I don't need to talk about the data privacy point here because Thierry covered that really excellent presentation there. So I think the last thing I'll just talk about is just the ability to innovate very quickly when you take advantage particularly of some of the software as a service tools. So container technology as well. These two things in combination, they allow us to put up a solution very quickly, do a proof of concept, move on to deployment very, very fast. So I think I better stop because
also, otherwise we're going to run into Torsten's
15
time.
minutes
That's
is
not
a tough.
so I think it's very interesting presentation. I think we got questions, but I think Torsten's going to do a presentation that maybe just one, but a very short one. Yeah, and then we'll go into overtime a bit because I want to give Torsten 15 minutes and some questions as well as a wrap up. So
yeah, I'm just going to put up my contact.
Very short.
Yeah, very short. Just about security and your experience about communication with Amazon. So do they easily agree with federal institutions to communicate issues, security issues, or is it all kept inside?
Do they agree? So, can you repeat that?
If they would have security issues, would they easily agree to communicate those issues to a central point of security of the national government? Or do they try to keep all behind their walls?
Oh, the cloud providers.
Yeah, from your experience.
Yeah, well, I would say in their case, they're obliged to report immediately anything that happens. And these are multi-billion-dollar companies. They're not taking chances with this kind of thing. So when there's a breach of something like that, it's immediate. Like
I can be very specific on that one.
Yeah.
2012, the Azure cloud went down. We had 3 servers, one in Hong Kong, one in Ireland, and the other one in Amsterdam. And we went down, we all went down, and we got a briefing 1 hour later of the Microsoft team that they were going down. And their security was breached, and they were all bringing all their data centers down, so even the Azure cloud, or whatever cloud, they will not fully guarantee availability. But at least they will warn you. But they will not guarantee your data security. They're very secure, but they can be breached. In that case, they go down. So they do a maximum to secure your data, but it doesn't give you 100% guarantee. So, and then you're also down. You got some downtime as well. And they pay you back for that. So you get your money back for those.
That was Azure.
Recompensation. It happened in around 2012. I think it was the early Azure cloud, so there was some issues. Thorsten, I'm gonna give you I'm gonna give you your full 15 minutes. No, you don't have to worry.
Are you going to give me the full 15 minutes?
No, please, thank you much. Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you.
All right.
My apologies, Thorsten.
No problem. Well, it's the usual thing. You can almost expect that when you're the last.
You're the last speaker, I know. Yeah.
Is it open already? Apparently not. We have quite a lot of presentations. All right. So yeah, slight shift of context. So yeah, I didn't really know into what session I would be placed, and what I did was basically I prepared a presentation that starts first of all with a context in which we are developing some of the cloud capabilities at WeTransform. And that's actually a Eurostars project, which is a research program that's slightly less well known than some others. So has any of you ever heard of the Eurostars Eureka program? 1, 2. Okay. Well, that means I got some information for you. Okay, so we're first going to talk about what is Eurostars and Eureka, because I think it's actually quite interesting. That is something that you might also want to use, or at least know about. Then we're going to look at who's doing that, because in this case, these projects are really about collaboration. And finally, what the project really tries to achieve, which picks up the cloud topic again. So first of all, Eurostars Eureka is a project or a funding scheme that has been going on for a few years, I think more than 3 by now, which is a funding for international consortia with at least 2 SMEs. So we've seen quite a lot of nice presentations now about companies basically working on various areas of cloud technologies. And yeah, some of them might consider to do that together, but you have to be from at least 2 countries. Research organizations can also participate, so if you're working with a university and you think they have something cool that should go to product, then yes. There's open calls, that's also very nice, so every 3 to 6 months there's a cutoff date. By the way, if you really like a challenge, the next one is next week, so have a go. The focus is clearly on building new products, so the funding can't be used for anything else. I'll elaborate a little bit more on that in a moment. And something to keep in mind is the actual funding is provided through national bodies under national rules and regulations, which are a bit more complex usually than the ones by the European Union. Yeah, going into the differences. So, I mean, the major program that I think most people know, so who knows Horizon 2020? That's about 15 times as much as before. So there's some differences. So first of all, the SME funding rate is different. So I'm only looking at SMEs now for universities. I think in both cases it's pretty close to 100%. In both cases, yeah, there are some different regulations. In Horizon 2020, it's 70% fixed. So not much discussion, 70% of the overhead. Of the full rate with overhead. In Eurostars, it depends on your country. So in Germany, it's 50. In Belgium, it's 55. In Italy, this year, it was 0. So yeah, some challenges there in some countries. However, one of the advantages is that the acceptance rate is much higher. So it's between 27 to 30% compared to Horizon 2020, where in some calls we are more at 2%. So it's really super competitive, which makes it really a gamble to actually invest in these proposals. A major difference is also that the funding in Eurostars is for new product development only. Whereas in Horizon 2020 you can also do capacity building, networking, research, outreach, exploitation, many different activities depending on the concrete instrument. Maximum funding is 500,000 euros per country usually, so if you have 5 organizations from one country and then one from another, that other country organization has 1. In Horizon 2020, there's no such strict limit. Yeah, and as a note, the actual approval proposal or process in the Eurostars project is somewhat complex, because first there's approval by the European bodies and then by all the national bodies again. So you have a two-stage process, and it can take a while. Yeah, but that's just as some context. I thought, like I said, it might be useful for you to also know about this instrument and maybe do some interesting work with that. So let's have a look at who's actually working together here. So one thing that the Eurostars evaluators are looking for are organizations that can work together and that really have complementary competencies. So they write about that very explicitly in the criteria, that you need to show that why do these organizations need to work together. And they actually really asked a lot of questions about that as well. So what's the different capacities and so on. In our case, we have 3 SMEs from Belgium, Italy, and Germany, plus an applied research organization from Germany, each one with slightly different competencies. So for example, for Geospark, who's also coordinating this project, so there has to always be one organization that can bear the burden of administration and who has to do the project management. That's something that they are very good at, and they also have lots of like solutions that sit on top of spatial data infrastructure. So just as an example, their spot booking application can actually work on Inspire services, so that these services don't just sit there, but they are actually utilized. The Fraunhofer Institute for Computer Graphics, I share some history with them. I was there for 8 years, and so I know a little bit about them still, but what they're currently doing is really mostly geodata visualization, 3D data, linked and semantic data visualization, but also developing new kind of frameworks. So we just heard the term serverless from Ken, and I'm thankful that I don't have to explain it anymore. So here we actually have a geodata processing framework that's built from the ground up to work in a serverless mode, so that you can really scale up very well. Yeah, we also have Epsilon Italia in the team, who's I think also quite well known in the Inspire community. They've now set up this Inspire help desk, and they are really a good service provider, and they're also very effective at networking, so with their experience from the SME Spire project. So we have these 4 companies or organizations who all contribute something else. I almost forgot ourselves, sorry. And we are the heavy lifting software engineer people in this consortium. So we built the actual cloud platform that's intended for Inspire, for e-reporting, for national SDIs, and even for open data, with a focus of really being cloud native. So we reuse some open source technology like Hail that's been there for a while, but we really started this about 2.5 years ago, basically with all the modern technology at our disposal here. Yeah, and these 4, I think, provide we were able to convince the reviewers, let's put it like this, that we do have complementary competencies, so we were allowed to start the project. Basically, there are several aspects to the project. So one is, for example, to do something which is effectively moving our transformation that typically happens on a server or on a desktop machine to cloud resources. There's 3 main use cases for that. One is if you have 20 gigabytes, but you'd like to have them transformed in the next minute. That's not going to ever happen on a laptop. You will need to parallelize that. Another thing is also simply scaling up. So there's lots and lots of requests. And when we think of the reliability criteria that we started the discussion with, those actually also apply to transformation services. So we really need to be able to support a lot of load and scale up with that. Also, if we are thinking of web applications for all kinds of purposes, we anyway need to have the transformation online. And in particular, when our resources are also already online, stored on S3 or something else, then it's simply much more effective than having to go through the network twice. The second thing that we're working on in this project is cloud download services. So that's basically, the idea is to have a serverless web feature service. And that's for us really a key point, because the scaling up a web map service that's quite achievable with some of the existing technology. So for example, if we use content delivery networks, if we use caching of commonly requested tiles and many other approaches, we can get to the reliability criteria. With a WFS, with its database backend and the specific requirements we get there, it's a bit harder. So there, we currently use a solution that's similar to what we heard from Grid about basically setting up a Docker swarm where we manage only the whole swarm but not individual instances to provide these. But in the end, what we really want to achieve is something that scales up very effortlessly and in small blocks as well. So not in degree instances, for example, or GeoServer instances, but actually in functions. That's very small blocks, like a function that can exactly supply a get feature request response. And the backend that we're using for that is called Georegister. That's the software that I mentioned briefly with Fraunhofer, which enables us to do exactly that. The only thing is that what it does need is an Elasticsearch instance, so it's based on storing chunks, in our case on S3, and these need to be indexed so that we can effectively get the right data for example, a get feature request. And the nice thing is that an approach like that really provides easy scalability up to hundreds of requests per second, and that it's also, in terms of application maintenance, it's basically zero application maintenance. It's one of these things that Amazon then does for you. Yeah, I had a couple of things mentioned yesterday in my presentation, but they are also part of this project actually. That's why I put the research label on them. We're also doing a lot of work on the front-end side. So if you think of cloud applications, one of the nice things is that you will be able to typically also use and access part of them on your mobile device, on your web browser, and so on. But that also means that in our case, if you want to define the transformation on these devices, you need a completely new approach. I think the Hail user interface is classical desktop. It works really nice on my full HD screen of that size approximately, but I wouldn't want to use it on my small screen. So we're also looking into new approaches about how to actually set up the transformation processes constrained to devices like that. And one of the approaches is called structured model mapping, which is still tied to the schema of the data. So you basically pick schema elements and decide how they should be transformed from the source to the target. But we're also working on new approaches. And before I jump into that, the idea really is to also make more use of how the Inspire data is actually structured. So, for example, one of the concepts that we've been developing now with Fraunhofer is something we call a linked map, where we basically use all those nice references and object graphs and so on we have in Inspire, and really enable new kinds of user experiences with that, where you explore along these paths, along these references, both implicit and explicit. And when we have that, the final step for us in this project is to do what we call direct instance manipulation mapping. So that's basically, we don't work on the schema of obviously anymore, but we actually only have one view, which is the map, which shows us the actual data, and using basically different types of gestures, we directly manipulate the objects on that map. So in this case here we have, much like in Hail, we have a source and a target side, and simply by drag and dropping objects to the right places and providing some additional information, it's possible to set up a transformation process. This is probably not going to replace, let's say, the full-blown desktop environments that we have now, where we have support for scripting and a million other features. But I think it's going to make at least the half or the 80% of the easier transformation projects very much more accessible and also a little bit more fun. And that's something I would always like to bring to everybody. And 2
minutes, Torsten.
That's fits perfectly well. That leaves 1 minute per pilot. So there's 2, and in this project as a last component, so after these technical developments, we also have to try them out on some, let's say, willing victims. In this case, they come from Italy and Belgium. It's in one case, it's the Datenbank on the ground Vlaanderen, or something like that. I hope it was close enough and I didn't insult any Belgians in the room. In this case, it's about basically enabling several applications on top of Inspire services that currently don't use Inspire services. And in the second case, it's Italy. It's the Institute for Environmental Protection, the national one that sits in Rome, who also are obliged to do a lot of Inspire harmonization, and they will use this framework, for example, for the CDDA reporting and other cases as well. Yeah, and the project is now exactly halfway through, so it's about 1 year left. And yeah, if you're interested to learn more either about the Eurostars program or about what we're doing here, then feel free to send questions, shoot emails, whatever you prefer to.
Thank you very much, Torsten. Right on time. Very impressive. Open the floor for a last question for Torsten as well, and then I'll very briefly wrap up. So, any questions for Torsten? No? That's strange, but
Yeah,
you got
they're
the
very
time to
hungry.
experience, but you got demo sessions and stuff going on, so you can visit the booth, you can visit the FME booth as well, and you can visit the degree booth as well. So I'm very happy with all this. So I got the impression that we got the cloud infrastructure is getting ready for Inspire. We're getting a new virtualization software. It's not really new, but Docker is on top of the game, as it seems, and it's used everywhere. So we got a full-blown infrastructure and application development platform, and platform in general for hosting our Inspire services and delivering these services to end users. At the same time, there's a lot of competition going on between several companies, which we can only applaud. It seems to drive the innovation for us as well, and in the end, it only comes to the benefit of the end users, which are all of us, of course, the Inspire implementer. So thank you guys very much for all the efforts you're making and the presentations you brought to us today. And also thanks, of course, to Thierry, who also set the scene on the legal framework, on the use of all this information in the end, because that's quite important as well. So and Paul just learn some lessons on the better use of GeoNetwork. And I also remember that GeoNetwork now also Docker image and is applicable in the cloud and this virtualization. So this makes me very happy. So I'm gonna let you go. Thank you very much for your resilience. Give you a good meal and a good trip back home tonight. I hope you enjoyed the conference. Thank you very much.